Okay, well, it looks like it's 7:15. I'm sure we're going to have a few latecomers because we're at a strange time at this term because our distribution class runs before this. But thanks for coming, you guys. And tonight we have some people that you've seen. You've actually seen Thad in the video from Portland Kettle Works. But Joe has come. He's a Portland State alum and a Portland Kettle Works head of marketing.
Sales.
Sales. Okay.
Nice to meet you guys.
We've actually infiltrated the whole lower levels of Portland Kettle Works with Portland State students.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Yes, graduates have infiltrated their company, or siblings of graduates.
Yeah, that's true.
So thanks you guys for coming, and we'll do the normal format where I think you're okay with them interrupting with questions?
Sure, absolutely.
We prefer it.
Yeah.
Okay, so they like you to interrupt with questions. And I think I've mentioned to you that Thad has built several breweries. They're about to build their own brewery. And then they do fantastic brewing equipment. Some people in this class actually have bought this equipment. Not in your group yet. I don't think we have anyone that's bought the equipment, but we have in part of our cohort going through, someone's just ordered some equipment, and it's all around town here and all around the U.S.
Yeah, good stuff.
So we'll let Thad tell us a little bit about the company, and
Yeah, perfect.
get rolling.
You want to start with the history? Let's see what our first slide is here.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to talk about today.
Jumping right into the stuff.
Okay. Aaron, go over a little bit of the Portland Kettle.
Yeah, so Portland Kettle Works is, we're 4 years old. We started off building small brewing systems. Initially, we were doing 1 barrel and 3 barrel systems, and only ultimately sold one single 1 barrel system to Road Brewery. Got out of that business and realized that there was a big push for us to build larger, more comprehensive systems. We still sell an enormous number of 3.5 barrel systems, but to go with those, we work all the way up through 30 barrel size now. So it's been about a 4-year transition from when we started in 2011 till now. We have sold very close, I'd say, to 100 breweries now. Yeah, and they're all over. We actually just consummated a deal in Northern Europe, which is our first European brewery. We have them South America, Central America, Canada, and all over the United States. So it's an interesting business.
Now, if anybody wonders about the 1 barrel size, we found that it wasn't the issue with the equipment, but more so you just can't physically produce enough beer on a 1 barrel size. It's just not enough. We found 3, then we upped it to a 3.5. Otherwise, you're just brewing constantly. We have a customer that opened with a 1 barrel, and 1 month after being open, he started ordering a 3.5, just because it was just too much work.
Although it's perfect for Road because they brew, I think, 24 hours a day in their brewery, and every shift they brew a test batch on that little 1 barrel system. They probably brewed more beer batches than anybody on a Portland Kettle Works system. I'd almost guarantee it. They're really aggressive about brewing on it. So,
is there a different setup for a brew house if they want to make lagers? No, that's more so in the cold side of things, lagering tanks and such.
I was going to mention, they've all seen this video that we did on Ale Apothecary. I don't know if you know about them, but they have a 1 barrel system. And I think most of the class realized that the guy was working his butt off to have that 1 barrel of beer as his production.
Well, that's the thing. You'll see guys like Hair of the Dog on a 4 barrel system, and they brew for 24 hours straight. It can be done. You can do a hell of a lot with a tank farm. It's just a lot of labor.
Yeah. So we're ready to jump into planning?
mm-hmm.
Can we make that bigger?
Oh, yeah, I'll screw that up. Can you see it?
Yeah, you guys, no, you can change the sizes of your screen to get things bigger.
Just to be you developing the concept of business plan.
Mm-hmm.
Just make it bigger.
So as we go through these slides, these first couple are these sort of trees that we'll look at, and I'm only going to highlight the light shaded blue areas, but there's a lot of pretty pertinent information in here. Do this kind of to just speed our way through the process a little bit. But obviously, you guys are going through the development concept and business plan stage right now, and you know what that's all about, trying to work through some of the issues on paper before they crop up as serious issues in the way into your business. We find in our business that what really drives people in over the mark of just conceptually thinking about having a brewery and dreaming about having a brewery is when they secure financing. That's a huge hurdle. Obviously, it takes a lot of money to get a brewery put together. But once you have secured your financing, wherever it may come from, so I've put some ideas down there. You private source, so that's your rich uncle, your dad, your own cash, whatever it takes. Bank financing. That can be a little tricky on a startup level unless you have an existing restaurant or something that you can leverage. Hard money, that's going to be expensive. Those are going to be short-term loans to get you going, but you're going to pay a lot for them. At any rate, once you get over that financing hurdle, where you will go next is to find yourself a suitable space. And I think while you're working your way through your financing, you should be thinking about what your space should look like, and it's going to be based a lot on how you want to run your brewery and what your brewery is going to be. There's obviously a lot of different kinds of brewing businesses out there, and you need to be functional in your space for what your concept is going to be, and really think about suiting your space to your concept. I would say that one of the most important things while looking for space is to hire a really competent commercial real estate broker and be able to clearly describe what your vision is for your brewery to that broker, because as much as anything else, that broker needs to get out there and sell your concept to potential landlords. Not all landlords, as we've found, not all landlords are real jazzed about having breweries in their building, believe it or not. So they don't get it yet. They don't understand what the ramifications for an area.
Some areas traditionally have had more issues with alcoholism and such. We ran into this in Mexico, where there was, in the past, there had been a lot of issues with fights and such in bars and restaurants, and they think that it's going to be the same issue with a brewery when it's going to be a high-class brewery with craft beer, $5-6 a pint, but the landlord can't get over the fact that they think it's going to be a cheap dive bar. And it's hard to negotiate putting a brewery into a location like that when you have that kind of notion with the landlords.
Yeah, those things do come up. I think that I would also say that getting a landlord that's on board with your concept, it can be really helpful. Landlords, obviously, they hold the cards, and they can help out in a lot of ways. They can help defer costs. They can raise your rent a little bit and do some work for you on the way in. Pour you a new concrete slab for $20,000, for instance, for your brewery, and they can amortize that over 5 years. And suddenly, you're paying a couple $100 a month, but you've got efficiencies out of it that you may not have had the cash to do in the first place. So, really important to get a good broker, have them be able to explain what your vision is, and then go out and find a landlord that's amicable to your cause and getting a brewery sited in their building.
A couple of rules of thumb, if people want to write this down, this may be valuable too. 5 to 20 barrel system, perfect ceiling height that you want to be looking for is about 14 feet or higher. You can deal with less if you're dealing with 12, that can happen.
We go through that on those other slides.
Oh, do we?
Yeah.
Okay, we won't
do that. Go now?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So next thing you're going to do is negotiate the lease, and it's amazing how long that can take, but you've got your attorney involved and their attorney and a couple of real estate brokers, and you'll burn 60 days, no problem, just getting through that lease negotiation process. While that's going on, don't waste the time. Use it to get a contractor or several contractors to look at the space and begin to get your timeline together, your numbers for what it's going to cost to do your rehabilitation. Be engaged with the city and talk to them about permitting, and know what to expect on that rollout through the permitting process. And if there's particular things that you need to pay attention to in the city where you are to get a brewery permitted, you should know that. We can go to the next slide, I think. There's a question about that. lot of information here. So what we have found is that at the point where you have signed your lease, practically within the next couple of days, you're going to go ahead and you're going to purchase equipment, because equipment takes a long time to get. And I'll let Joe pick up the.
On average, lead times right now, this isn't Chinese equipment, you know, they just put it on a boat, 45 days is to you. Average lead times right now for American manufacturers, anywhere from 6 to 9 months. I've heard that some of the Germans are up to a year and a half out right now from when you put down money to when you actually get equipment delivered. So I've actually turned down quite a bit of business where somebody says, hey, I'm going to be starting to pay on a lease in 3 months, I need equipment then. But in a lot of ways for us manufacturers, it can take 8 to 10 weeks simply to get materials on hand to begin building. And it doesn't include what we've already sold and have scheduled. So make sure to start vetting manufacturers far before, at least a few months before you even get a space. So at least the second that you do land that space, or you're about to, you're ready to pull the trigger. This includes checking references and also finding out where the equipment is manufactured. There's a lot of vendors out there now that simply import, would lead you to believe that it's American equipment, and all they do is they'll call it American if they wire it, or they may never even see it at all. It just ships directly to you. So I would suggest visiting the manufacturer. Our opinion is if you can't sit down and have a beer with your manufacturer, I would never spend $200,000–$300,000 with anyone that I couldn't physically knock on their front door and say hello and see what they do. So in our opinion, just like it says there, world-class beer starts with a reliable partnership. There's a whole hell of a lot that we can do for you. If we don't have the answer, you know, ingredient sourcing, that kind of thing. We have a lot of contacts out there all throughout the country or the world to help you source or overcome some of these issues. All you have to do is ask. So if you can get a manufacturer that has those kind of connections, it's huge.
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll talk about that a little bit more in some later slides about how we work through process with clients. So the next thing, you know, you'll get your manufacturer on board. You're going to go through a permitting process. You can get some demolition done real rapidly, and hopefully you're in a municipality or a county that really wants to get a brewery in, and your permitting process goes fast, because that'll speed your build out. You want to watch your contractor carefully. Make sure that you know your timeline. I mean, just run a good solid business with your contractor so that you've got dates, you've got hurdles. If construction always takes longer than you expect, but at least you want to know that the reason that that's happening, not that your contractor isn't showing up and no one's on the job, but things happen. You know, you find that you need to replace the sewer line when you didn't think you had to. Hey, it's no big deal. That's going to cost you a little bit of money. It's going to set you back a week, but at least you know what happened versus just not having anybody on the job site. So that
happened to us with our brewery, actually.
Yeah, being clear with expectations and scheduling, and then making sure your contractor can communicate with your supervisor. Don't let them have a lot of rein on that. If you find that you're not getting the communication that you want, you need to rein them in and make sure that you begin to get your communication and get your project going on time. Time is money. I mean, your lease is going to start 90 days after, maybe 60 to 90 days after you sign it. You're going to start paying money on that. You certainly want to try and have your doors open by that point. And if your contractor hasn't finished his work, it makes for a pretty touchy situation going down the road.
Dave, are brokers asking for a marketing package for the potential landlords? Does the business plan cover that, or are they looking for more?
You know, typically a business plan is good. That gives the landlord a pretty solid idea of what your concept is. If you can get some pictures in there, anything that you can do to kind of get some eye candy and have solid numbers so they can understand that your business isn't seat of the pants or fly by night, all that stuff helps. Let the landlord know what you would expect to have them help with. I mean, you're going to go through a process where there's a letter of intent, and the letter of intent is going to spell out the lease rate. It's going to spell out the term of the lease. It's going to spell out the rent increases over time, anything that you expect the landlord to deliver to you, and then the period of time that you're going to get for free rent, that's the rent period before you begin to actually pay for it, and what you have to come up with for money at the beginning and then every after the rent starts. So, you know, your marketing package can be designed to those hurdles. If you, those things that I just said are all the things that are going to wind up in your letter of intent. If you design your marketing package toward them, answers a lot of questions for the landlord up front.
I think a lot of you have done a good job with pictures in your business plan so far. Some people have put a lot of great concept pictures, but they think they want it to look like inside that they've taken from existing spaces. So.
Yeah, and I would, you know, going back to the charts here, on the construction build-out phase, when you get into that, you're going to be about a 90-day build-out. So it's important to 90 to even 120, if depending on how robust it's going to be. I mean, if you're doing a full brew pub out of a warehouse or something, it can take quite a while to do it. Landlord's going to have some work they usually need to get done, and then your contractor will take over. So you want to get your brewery equipment ordered and try and get it delivered on site before construction is complete, but your brewery area is complete. The brewery area is actually a little bit easier below ground, you know, where you're getting your plumbing and you're getting your new concrete slab in if you're going to do that, and an epoxy floor if you're going to do that, and then you can set the brewing equipment on there. You're still at that point at least a couple of weeks away from getting the brewery complete enough so that you can run it. We usually do a 1-week installation process, but we're very diligent about what we do, and we have a pretty good process worked out. If you're going to do it on your own, it's going to take more time.
Just have utilities stubbed in near the system, then all the final hookup, programming, walk you through a hot water process. Then you've got another 3 days of CIP passivation. There's going to be some small parts everybody purchases. Yeah. Every time there's a couple $100 in small parts. You're going to get online, say you're usually brewing, you know, from when you get equipment dropped to start brewing, 2.5 weeks later.
3 weeks even. Yeah. And it can be longer, just depends on how complicated things are. Then you'll commission your brewery. That's that process of
never ends.
Yeah, it never really ends. I mean, brewing is a manufacturing process. So manufacturing, as we know, it never ends. You are always looking for better ways to do stuff, and just getting your brewery running is a hurdle. Once you get it going, getting it to run the way you want it to run may take you years, because you're always going to find little things you can do to improve the process. And I put down soft opening, so you allow yourself a soft opening where you're not really telling people that you've opened yet. That's just a good idea. Otherwise, you're going to get hammered with a lot of
6 weeks seems really long, but just make sure to have a soft open in general.
Yeah, 6 weeks after brewery startup's not bad though, because you get some beer on tap. Then, otherwise, you're really heavy. And there you are. Congratulations.
Okay. Equipment selection, hot side. Cold side green management. Okay.
So that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
So this is the how we've broken down the next part of the presentation.
So your video.
A lot of people ask about the differences between direct fired and steam. There we go.
We're all kind of cozy.
And people ask, you know, what's the benefits of one over the other? Well, first, as you start to get really large, like for example, we don't make a 20-barrel direct fired system. Part of the issue becomes that for a boil kettle, we'll only heat the bottom of the boil and then about 15 inches of sidewall or so. Heat exchange is temperature differential as well as surface area. And with the direct fired system, we start to run into issues with not being able to have enough surface area. Well, steam, we can bottom jacket, side jacket, and put in an internal heat exchanger, so you have plenty of surface. So that brings us to the next point, that steam is much mellower than a direct fired system, so you're not going to be able to caramelize your beer, which may be a positive or negative depending upon the recipes that you're trying to do. So if you're trying to do on the lighter side of beers, you want to do pilsners and the such, steam is quite a bit more control. That runs about 250 degrees instead of, 700-800 degrees like a direct fired system. Main difference between the two, though, I'd say, at least with our engineering, would have to be step mashing. With the steam system, we have an external calandria that you're able to step mash if you want to do a protein rest. Now, granted, a lot of people say that this is antiquated style of brewing and everything is single infusion, and if that's true, a direct fired system is totally fine. But a steam is a little bit more efficient. You have a little bit more flexibility to it, where you can physically adjust globe valves within the vessels themselves to determine where you want that heat put, how much heat at one time. Direct fire is pretty much on or off. So direct fire is the automatic car. It just drives and you're good to go. With steam, it's the manual. You have a lot more control, but it takes a little bit more to actually run the machine.
Eric is asking about what about electric for smaller systems?
We can do electric for big systems. It would just be a steam generator. As to, I know there's a lot of electric systems out there that have actual electric elements in the hot liquor tank, for example. It ends up having a stratification within the tank. So if you imagine you just have a small heat exchanger in there, a little element that gets super hot, but there's no actual pumping within that hot liquor tank, you're going to have a pocket of very warm water in one section and cool water in another. If we're heating an entire bottom of the vessel with a direct fired, you're going to get some convection. If we have an internal heat exchanger, you're going to have a lot of natural convection. So you're going to have the same temperature throughout. It leads to greater consistencies in your.
Now, Chris and Nate are getting at two different things. Is there a significant cost difference between the two systems, and which is more cost effective?
We've built so that between the direct fired and steam system, the steam is exactly 7% more expensive. But then you have to add the cost of the boiler in. So, 7-barrel system, it can end up being another $16,000, $18,000 to go steam. Now, for you that are in Colorado, Texas, and Southern California, Colorado and Texas deal with low NOx requirements. Southern California deals with ultra low NOx, and this is essentially the environmental effect that your boiler has, on the environment, I suppose. And a lot of boiler manufacturers charge a premium for this. For low NOx, you can expect to spend an additional 50% for the boiler. For ultra low NOx, it can be an extra 100%. So we'll find that in Southern California, there's a lot of direct fired systems. Ironically, it's worse for the environment, but the state gives it the stamp of approval. So, which is more cost efficient. I don't know if you're ever going to cover your cost of utilities. Natural gas is not that expensive when you're talking about a $20,000 swing in price. The steam system is more environmentally friendly and it has greater control. I wouldn't consider cost as much other than initial investment or which works better with your recipes. If you're looking at the cost of your natural gas at this size, I wouldn't even take it into consideration.
It just doesn't have that much difference.
Not that much. Gas boiler is 82, 83% efficient. I mean, you can get an ultra low NOx that's 98, but the damn thing's so expensive, you'll never pay that off.
But the steam kettle heats up. It's boiling by the time. Right, it's got very
that's
fast.
True.
You couldn't have a much shorter cycle time.
That's true.
Yeah, steam is a highly efficient. It's a super highly efficient system for industrial process, and that's why it's used there. It's not just used in the brewing process. It's used in almost all, all food processes, all juice making processes. It's part of all those. People are running off the steam generator, and the reason they're doing it is because it is efficient. And it does save money over time, and it also gives you immediate response, whereas with direct fire, you're going to have a little bit of a lag in response to turning the system on. The difference between on a 10-barrel, for example, direct fired after full transfer takes about 15 minutes to reach a full rolling boil. With steam, you are already there before full transfer, so I suppose you're saving 15 minutes of brew day.
Yeah, except for if you live at high altitude, then it took us a lot longer to get our kettle up to boiling.
Advantages, there you go. That's true. Ease of installation. You'll have a burner on your hot liquor tank and burner on your boil kettle instead of running all the steam piping and such. So installation is quite a bit easier. Also, installation of steam can be quite expensive. Now, we do low pressure steam, so you don't technically have to have a boiler certified plumber run that plumbing, but still gets to be quite expensive. It's lower maintenance. There's not a lot to those burners. The potential for caramelization is a positive if that's what you're going for, and this is more efficient than electric, as in that's the elements that I was discussing. Now, there is no heat for the mash tun. It's all just single infusion. Hit it with your strike water, sparge, and you're good to go. The issue with the 20-barrel systems and larger, like I've brought up, and we no longer manufacture direct-fired 3.5-barrel systems, but if there is an open flame that you can see, you need a Type 2 ventilation hood.
Janine's asking you if you can get caramelization with a steam system.
It's going to be tough. There might be a way to do it, but
there is a way. Now, if you have a side jacket and you throw that on when you're about 6 inches filled with wort, every inch that it rises, it's going to be quite hot, and you may get some caramelization. But remember that steam is only, it's 14 psi, it's about 250 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not that hot. Steam brew house. Efficient to operate, scalable, larger sizes. I kind of covered all of this.
Much mash tun is heated. We've actually innovated our mash tun system, so we use a calandria on the outside of the mash tun. And what a calandria is it's a vessel that allows steam to completely surround and supersaturate the wort as it flows through an element. And the element is basically small tubes flowing through a jacketed steam manifold, and we put those now on the outside of the mash tun. Allows you to control the temperature on the mash tun. This is one of the things that you can't do. One of the greater benefits of a steam brew house is you can't really control the temperature in the mash tun in a direct fire, but in a steam brew house, in one pass through that external calandria that we install, you can go from 0 degrees to 30-degree temperature rise in just a 3-foot cylinder running your mash through your Vorloff cycle. So it allows you to step, it allows you to ramp up your mash temperatures and to decoct and finish and to when you just completely stop your machination process when you get up to the point where you're ready to do that.
You can recirc, hit about 165, 170, and then run it to the boil if you like.
Yeah, you got very high, precise heat control with the system as well. Yes, the system is a little bit more expensive to purchase, mostly because you got to get the boiler, and then the installation for the boiler costs. It's a little more complicated to operate, but with that degree of complication comes all the increased control over the system, which is really great to have. Could take a little longer commissioning period. I mean, it takes a while to understand how steam operates, and it's an interesting system for heating things, and it's kind of actually fun once you figure out how it operates and what you can do with it. You'll have a lot of fun running a steam system.
Cold setting glycol. So with a glycol unit, depending on what size we're talking about, when it says sizing, you always want to size for additional 30% at least tanks.
Wait, can I just back up a little bit?
Sure.
There are some people in the class that don't really understand what glycol is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you might have to back up and say what purpose of.
So glycol, how a fermenter or a jacketed bright tanks work is that there is a glycol jacket on the outside. So if you imagine you have a cylinder filled with wort or beer, depending on where you are in the process, there's a jacket that surrounds that entire tank that's filled with 28-degree glycol. It's almost the opposite of antifreeze, so that you're actually cooling that tank.
Yeah, there's some slides of the tank here in a couple of minutes.
Perfect. We'll go over. So that's what it uses is a solenoid valve to turn on or off the flow of that 28-degree glycol, and your glycol unit will chill that glycol down to that 28 degrees. So when sizing a glycol unit, you want to size it for at least an additional 30% growth. And the sizing is actually not the amount of tanks you have, but the amount of fermenters that you'd like to crash at one time. This means going from 70 degrees down to about 34 degrees. We size it for a 24-hour crash, but that's how you size your glycol unit. Also, when it comes to redundancy, it's great to have a dual compressor unit that if you imagine half of your glycol unit, one of those compressors goes out, you can still limp on with the other half instead of ruining all your beer. And when it says chill in the walk-in, there are jacketed bright tanks. Now, do they know what bright tanks are used for?
Yeah, most people know.
Okay.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming everybody knows the bright tank is the tank we go to after the fermenter. And everybody in cider is going to have a bright tank.
Yeah.
And some of you will have plastic fermenters in cider, but you'll probably have a stainless bright tank.
Absolutely. So we can either do a jacketed bright tank, which is really popular for packaging because it's just right there with all your fermenters. If you were to go with serving vessels where you wouldn't actually have to keg your bright tank, you would probably put those in a walk-in cooler that would be held at serving temperature, and that would just be run straight to the tap line. So it makes it really convenient that you don't need to purchase nearly as much cooperage and possibly not a keg washer, which can cost quite a bit of money.
Just make it yourself.
Yeah. Sizing per, I don't understand.
Oh,
Sure.
sizing glycol per barrel. I think actually in my slides I give you a little formula for doing that, but I'd be interested to see what you think in terms of sizing glycol per barrel of.
That's tough to say.
I have an algorithm from one of the manufacturers. There was a lot to it. I can just tell you that 80% of the sizing all had to do with how much you're crashing at one time. You can load up a huge farm tanks on a small glycol unit. The second that you want to crash something, you need a much larger unit. So a glycol unit is great for holding temperatures, but dropping temperatures, you need a lot bigger unit. The formula is pretty complex.
So you're talking about, for crashing, you're dropping at 40 or more degrees.
Yeah, so it's going to put a big draw on the system, and the system's going to run hard to keep it. And while you're doing that, what you want to do, you want to crash the tanks you need to crash without having an effect on the fermentation tanks that are still in process. They want to continue to hold their fermenting temperature and not spike up, because then you'll drive your yeast to ferment much more rapidly, and you're going to get funny tasting beer at the end of the day.
But like at our system, we also had our bright tanks on the same glycol chiller.
Which actually, the glycol guys like the bright tanks on there because they look at those as cooling reservoirs.
Oh,
because
yeah.
the glycols also, they actually have less draw than the crashing tanks. Crashing tanks are they're the big deal.
Yeah. Anyhow, Jeremy, you'll see a little I put in the sizing sheet to get an estimate for that. We'll have to see when at the CBC, I'll see if I can find the formula the vendors have.
Email, it's Andy Backer with G&D Chillers. I can actually forward his information. He would help all of you guys. You just tell him how many tanks you have, and he'll size a glycol unit for you.
Yeah, that's great.
So here's a drawing of a fermenter. I wish I could point at it. But
I can point.
Can you? Okay, perfect. So we have two jackets there. We have a lower jacket in the cone itself, and that is after you crash. That's to make sure that your yeast bed, when it populates down to the bottom there, stays cool. And then you have a side jacket, and that's just additional surface area to hold or to drop the temperature. We then also have a racking port. We have a sample valve. You can carbonate within this, so it's called a uni tank. And then there's a final inch TC port there that has your temperature probe.
Which is there.
Yep.
And then there's insulation over that whole thing so that you don't see that dimpling. It's encased inside the tank, and there's insulation and an outer shell around the outside of its 14-gauge stainless steel.
Nathan, average time to crash wort is 12 to 24 hours. Grain management. This is a big thing that a lot of people don't know. We're going to try to hit the market with. I was just at one of the breweries here in town, and I asked what their mash efficiency was. Industry average is about 85%, plus or minus 5%, depending on what recipe you're doing. They were at 72%. I said, well, hell, what's going on? I looked at their mash ton. It didn't seem to be anything wrong with it. Dimensions were okay. They had a B-wire pulse bottom. so what kind of mill do you have? And they said, well, it's a feed mill. So that thing is made for corn. So when you're talking about grain management, a lot of people don't think of the importance or the cost. But if you have a feed mill that's designed for feeding hogs, you're going to have much lower efficiencies, and it's going to hit you overall in your ingredient costs than if you have a mill that's designed for barley and such for brewing. So you have a couple different styles for brewing. If you're a very small brewery, you may not have room for a mill or may not be able to purchase one, and you can buy pre-milled grains. And that works okay. There's not a lot of control, and it's quite a bit more expensive, but you can get by with it for a while. Or you can buy bagged grains, which from a 3.5 to probably a 10-barrel size is pretty average. And then you can also purchase a grain silo. Now you can either get a half truckload or you can get a full truckload. A smaller brewery may not necessarily need a full truckload of grain, so you may be able to split that with another local brewery, where a half truckload silo would be perfect for you. But your costs are going to drop dramatically if you do have a silo, and things are going to be quite a bit easier for you, or you just get a truckload of grain, fill it up, and then you're going to auger to a mill.
Mm-hmm. No handling bags anymore, or very little. Your specialty grains are always going to be bagged, but your base malt would be what goes into your silo.
Yeah.
Machination, delivery to the brew house, and hydration. So if you're getting your grain brought in bags, you can either dump the grain directly into the mash tun and mix it with strike water that's in there, or there are ways that you can deliver it through a hydrator, which is a preferred way to do it, so the grain actually drops through a tube and gets sprayed with water, heated water from all sides, and it really gets a good hydration going, keeps your dough balls out of your mash tun. Going to give you more consistency in your product for sure, and more consistency in your efficiencies. The backside of grain in is grain out. Now you've got the spent grain, and there's as much spent grain in volume, but more in weight, certainly quite a bit more in weight than what went into the mash tun, and you need to deal with that. And we've seen all iterations of people trying to work their way through getting that grain out thing handled. We've seen people go into mid-block buildings, go back to real estate again. When you're looking at a building, think about how you want to get your grain out of the building. If you're getting a 15-barrel system, you need to think every time that I mash in, I'm going to have 6 barrels of wet grain weighing 550 pounds a piece that I need to get out of the building and to go to recycle, and you need to be prepared to do that.
It's also in the plow, so rakes and plow are an option. The bigger system that you purchase, the more likely it is that you want to purchase a plow, because it's going to actually push out all of these grains for you, so you can just be receiving it with a drum or some other container instead of having to manually drag that out yourself. Then on the other side of grain management, a lot of people don't know what a grist case is, but I try to explain to them that if it's a one-man operation, you're on a 7 or a 10-barrel system, and you have quite a few bags of grain, because you probably don't have a silo at that point. If you're a one-man show, you're going to be stuck cutting these bags open and pouring them into a mill, and if you don't have a grist case, it's just going to be augered straight to your mash tun. So the issue is that you can't monitor your mash tun, you can't be looking at your strike water volumes, temperatures, or be cleaning a tank, because you have to babysit a mill where you pour grains. If you have a grist case, this is essentially a large holding vessel. So the night before, the morning of, you're going to pour all your bags of grain, and it's going to fill this grist case. So let's say you do that the night before, you come in the next morning with a hot coffee, all you're doing is flipping a switch to an auger, and it's going to begin transferring all of that grain that you know you have your entire recipe's worth to your mash tun, so you can monitor the system. That could be a $12,000 swing for having a second auger and a grist case, but that essentially replaces an entire person. So it can pay itself off rather quickly.
Yes, it's hugely beneficial.
Let's get that question too.
Doug's, what's the benefit of carbonating in a fermenter? Don't you lose the carbonation once you transfer?
Yeah, the only reason that we make them uni tanks to be able to carbonate in the fermenter is sometimes if your bright tanks are, let's say that you bought fermenters and 2 bright tanks to process, and you've got yourself in a pickle, and your bright tanks are both busy, but you've got a batch of beer that needs to come off, you can, in that pickle, you can go ahead and carbonate inside the fermenter and basically use it as a bright tank.
Technically, you can do it without a bright tank. You can run a yeast dump and then carbonate within the fermenter, but there's a reason that they call it a bright tank. Every time that you transfer from a fermenter to a bright, you leave a lot of that yeast buildup that was on the sidewall and such, so you end up with bright beer. But
yeah, I would recommend, no matter what, if you're gonna carbonate in your fermenter, you move to a fresh fermenter that's clean and get the beer off that yeast, because if there's a lot of buildup on the walls, and you really want to get that beer off of the yeast as soon as you can once you hit your.
Yeah, so it's like a backup plan. You can use the fermenter as a bright tank.
Yep.
If you're in a pinch, clean fermenter, go into that and carbonate in there. In a unit tank, if you have to.
Yeah.
I see places I'm like, oh, they're using their fermenter for bright tank.
Yeah, I've seen breweries that use huge tanks basically as their fermenters too. It just makes harvesting their yeast practically impossible, but they're willing to do that because, say, they've got ceiling height restrictions, and they still need to make 30 barrels of beer in 12 feet of ceiling height, so they'll use a bright beer type of tank to ferment.
George, a unitank is any vessel that you can ferment, carbonate, and package from in the same unit. And then Bill, is it filtered before you carb?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our breweries don't filter at all, honestly.
No.
But I mean, if it has all that yeast in there,
Yeah.
you know, it kicks up all the yeast, and so
Yeah,
I think it's better to still move it over without filtering it and
Yeah.
then carbonate. I myself would not carbonate on top of a yeast bed.
No, probably not a good idea.
You definitely want to do the yeast dump at least. So, what else do we have here? Perhaps, oh, this is you.
Efficiencies. Here we go. So brew house efficiency, and I'll read this, is a measure of the product produced from the brew house as a percentage of the total potential theoretical yield. So what we're talking about in that conversation, and I invite you to check out that link, is essentially if you put in X amount of grain and you process it with X amount of water, what should be the amount of sugar and ultimately the sugar content, the wort that you are going to get out of the brew house. That is a highly theoretical concept. It's something that as a brewer you will work toward over a long period of time, like maybe years, before you really get all your recipes to run as efficiently as you would like to. It has a lot to do with how you handle your grain, probably more how you handle your grain than anything else. A well-constructed mash tun is going to be a real strong tool for you as you begin to increase your efficiencies in your brew house. And as you begin to use that mash tun, get your strike waters perfect, and get your milling process perfected, you will see your efficiency slowly increase and increase and increase. And it's a fun process to go through. Don't expect to be getting 90% efficiencies the first time you use your system. It's just not going to happen. We have a lot of brewers that even today when I talk to them tell me that they're running their process, at 72%, but they don't care because they love the wort that comes out of it, and that's what they really care about. They're more interested in what their product is than what the efficiency that they're getting out of the brew house is. In contrast, we talk about brewery efficiencies, and this is a lot of what we do at Portland Kettle Works, working with the clients from the very initial step when they come to us and say, okay, we have or are about to rent a space, and this is what the space looks like. And we'll go through with them to talk about what size system they're going to put into the space, and then how they're going to position the brew house and how they're going to handle their grain as it comes out of the mash tun, and what they're going to do with the wort as it moves out of the brew house and into their fermentation process, and then ultimately into bright tanks. And are they going to put it in kegs? How are they going to wash their kegs? We like to lay that entire process out on paper and do our best to make sure that we have a design for your brewery that is efficient, in that you aren't fighting yourself every day by trying to go and do things that you should have thought through initially that now you can't fix. Every single day you're going to run that brewery, and when you run the brewery, the cost of not having efficiency in your process builds upon itself. Every single day you do the same thing backwards. It costs both, well, emotionally to some degree, but also it costs you as a business owner in lost time and lost productivity.
I should also add that we've been talking a lot about breweries. The same goes for cideries, and especially how you decide to stack those plastic fermenters in cideries and how you're pumping from one thing to the other, because the full fermenter has to actually support the ones above it, and you can get into a big mess if you need to empty one below one that has something stacked above it. So there's a lot of interesting problems with using plastic fermenters in stacks and pumping product around there too.
Yeah, visiting breweries and talking to breweries that have been around for a while and looking at what they've done. I mean, ultimately, every space that you get into, you get a lot of crazy stuff that you need to work around. Ceilings, small footprint, meaning not a lot of space on the floor. You know, some of the hardest breweries for us to design are the ones that are 20,000 square feet, and it's just a big, huge room with 22-foot ceilings, because it's like,
what do you do with it?
yeah, those are the ones you can do anything that you want. So, you know, we just basically plop the brew house down in a convenient location and then build the tank line around it. The ones that are less of a challenge are where you have some issues that you need to work around, and then the brew house, you get pointed in a direction to explore maybe one or two ideas about how to lay out the brewery, and ultimately you come up with the best design, and that's what you do. And you're always thinking about that efficiency process. You know, how's your grain getting in? How's it getting out? How's your beer going out the door?
Perfect.
Are we still using the contact page with PSU student as a subject if they needed quotes?
It's a good idea. What do you
Is it still on there with BYOB? No, it's not on there. Email me directly. It's Joe, J-O-E, at portlandkettleworks.com. Anybody, if you want to post that on there. I met with someone today from the class here. I think I've gotten a couple emails from people in this class, but if you just send me an email, put in subject line, Portland State, anything like that, I'll make sure to take care of you.
Any questions from you guys about systems? I think you were talking about ceiling height at one
Oh, that's
point.
right.
I
Yeah,
think there's another, the slides that we did in the movie are a little different than these slides.
Perfect location. So if you're anywhere from a 3.5 barrel system can deal with 10-foot ceilings. If you were to go with a 5 through 20 barrel system, it's not actually a system itself. So you can look at a drawing and think, well, hell, I can fit that. The issue is that if you're 6 feet tall and you're standing on the platform of the catwalk, it's what's your ceiling height, or what's your ceiling height? Is your head going to be hitting the ceiling? So 14 feet up to 30 feet, doesn't matter how tall you get. Also, you want to be on a single floor building. If you have people above you, we ran into it with apartments. You're either going to have odors that the people above you are going to have issues with, or two, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to vent out. With a direct fired system, you're going to need 2 natural gas or propane vents from each of your burners. Plus, you're going to have a vent for your boil kettle. With a steam system, you're going to have a vent for your boil and then a vent for your boiler.
Yeah, I'd recommend staying away from multi-story buildings with apartments or condominiums above your brewery. It can be done, but it's really not worth the headaches.
We wanted to put one here in the School of Business in our new building in the first floor.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen.
Aesthetic question, what about copper kettles? We've done them. They are difficult to maintain.
Horrible.
Yeah.
We had one.
Yeah, they're a pain in the ass.
You have to buff it and clean it every day.
Or not, you just let it be.
You can let it be, but if it's in a showcase window, which we had in Park City, in Wasatch, we had the copper kettle in the window. It was just, you know, like, don't ruin that thing, don't touch it, it will look like crap.
Doug, how about calculating optimal square footage? Now, these are extreme rules of thumb. You know, if you're in a really long, narrow hallway, we saw that true in Denver. 20 feet wide, right, 150 feet long. The most interesting space I've seen for a brewery. But if we're talking optimal square footage, you can, let's say, no less than 600-700 square feet, but then start running 1 square foot per barrel of beer produced annually. So if you want to make 1,000 barrels of beer, you can work that with 1,000 square feet. And if you start going really large, you're going to make 5,000 barrels. You may not need 5,000 square feet, but for everybody probably in this class, looking anywhere from a 3.5 to a 15-20 barrel system. Decent rule of thumb.
Yeah.
So what's included in that?
That would be brew house and tank side. They
Walk-in cooler.
Yeah, not necessarily
packaging,
ingredient
bottles.
storage. No, no packaging, no ingredient storage. That's just physically where we're going to lay out our equipment. You need that much space.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. How about determining feasibility of concrete floor for a brew house? Is core sampling or X-ray the way to go? It's up to you. I know we've had some customers do core sampling, but
Yeah, the brew house, it depends on what size the brew house is. You know, your maximum weight can be really heavy too. I mean, you get a lot of point load on them, but there are ways around that. I guess that core sampling is a reasonable thing to do. If you're concerned about it and you wind up with a 3-inch thick floor, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I guess you'd want to know ahead of time that you have that problem. You can lay down a piece of stainless steel on the floor or something and brew on top of that. That would be a reasonable way to do it, or you re-pour your slab. Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. Easy to do as well and pretty inexpensive.
Any more questions? Well, there's like a zillion of you out there. There must be questions about equipment. 14 gauge stainless steel barrel systems, 3.5 to 30 barrels, electric requirements for steel versus direct.
So we do 14 gauge is our outer shell on our tanks. So that it is covering our insulation. It's
12, 20, 14.
Yeah, we
12,
do 12
gauge inner skin,
Yep.
20 gauge jacket, 14 gauge outer skin. Electric requirements for steam versus direct fired. So without a cold liquor tank on a 5 through 20 barrel system, it's 110 volt, 40 amps to the control panel. If we're talking adding a CLT in there, it's going to be 60 amps.
CLT's cold liquor tank. We can work around your electrical requirements in your brewery quite a bit, and any manufacturer should be able to do that. We have, and we should add this to the slideshow too, is some of our selection criteria that we use that we actually send out to you and your contractor to specify what you have for electricity coming in, and then we'll work with you to go back and make sure that all the components of the brewery fit what you've got. It's just information that needs to be known.
Would it help having, I've got documents, I could share you installation documents if you want those.
Oh, that'd be great.
You want those?
Yeah.
Perfect.
We can post those.
Yeah.
Pros and cons of mash water combos versus separate vessels.
How much beer do you want to make, Nate?
Yeah, that's the first question. I think that's a good question.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're getting down to an efficiency equation there. And if you're on a 20, 15 barrel system, maybe even 30 barrel up to that size, separating out the mash and lauter, I don't think you're going to see enough efficiency to justify the cost of going there and the space requirement.
Nate, that's the two questions. What kind of recipes are you brewing, and how many barrels a year do you want to produce? That's going to give you your answer right there. If you're doing really light beers, you want to go the way of the Germans. That'll work, where you're going to have higher efficiencies. The more beer you brew, the better it is to have that separated. And the real benefit would actually have a hot liquor tank, a mash tun, a lauter tun, boil kettle, and whirlpool, all separate vessels. So then you can literally have something going in each, and you have this process where you can whip through a lot of beer, but you're going to need to have multiple brewers running shifts. A lot of breweries do this, where you can be on a 10-barrel system and produce, 10,000 barrels of beer. That's because you have that thing running all the time. The kettle never cools down. Otherwise, if it's a 1 or 2 man show, I don't see a lot of benefit to having a separate mash from water. Some would disagree, but it's just the majority.
Yeah, it complicates your brewing process.
How about
Maybe unnecessarily, but tough to
when
say.
add drains?
Find how thick.
It's a good question.
Bill, I don't know what you mean.
Maybe when you add drains into this concrete, yeah, that's a good. I know I know what you're saying. That's a good point. When you add drains into the brewery, you can definitely find out how thick the concrete is.
Oh,
Yeah, good point. Do you build open fermenters?
We have very occasionally. So there's no problem to build an open fermenter. It's just not everybody ferments in that way.
Want to make lagers? What's the best system? Can we do a decoction mashing with American type system?
How traditional of a decoction mash? If you want to determine that you're throwing it in another vessel that's heated, the answer is not with us. We can do a decoction port on a direct fired system that you run your mash against a hot liquor tank, water through the heat exchanger. But honestly, every customer that we've done that for, they like the option that they think, well, hell, I can, but it's such a pain in the ass to do, they never actually do it. So if you want to step mash, go steam. And if you want to go mostly lagers, also go steam because it's mellower with more control. So I'd say absolutely steam system for you.
Yep, and lagering tanks.
Yep.
Afterwards.
And Patrick, if you get a quote for a brew house, what is included in the price? I think we have some quotes. Did you guys, like, once you posted for this past week's assignment, there's a whole bunch of the previous classes. People had quotes posted there. We've saved them.
I've tried to divide it into 4 sections: grain handling, hot side, cold side, and ancillary equipment. So it would go literally from mill, auger, grist case, auger, grist hydrator, then brew house, which would be your mash tun, boil kettle, hot liquor tank, catwalk. Going from there, you're going to have a hot liquor tank pump, a heat exchanger, either single stage or 2 stage, depending on your water. Then we start getting into cold side, a fermenter, single size, double size, bright tank, single wall, double wall, single size, double size, glycol unit, a boiler if you have a steam system. Then we just go and go and go. Keg washer if you're looking for one. We're starting to do those now. So really everything you need, other than we don't touch cooperage and we don't do ingredients. So no yeast, no hops, anything like that.
Yeah. I think you have those little turnkey systems still.
3.5 barrel. Yeah.
3.5 barrel turnkeys. Pretty nice little systems.
Yeah, those are great.
What about the fermenter and bright tank numbers for making lagers versus making ales?
Take it 2 weeks on a turn for an ale, 10 to 14 days. A lager, it can be 2 months. It just depends upon your recipe.
Typically more like 30 days.
Ish.
45 days.
30
yeah.
to 45, it'd be longer.
Yeah.
I've heard longer. We're in craft. I mean, there's some extreme stuff out there.
That's why you see a lot of people making ales. Although I'd say a lot of light beers starting to crop up, which is interesting. I like it. It's nice to see pilsners and lagers starting to come along.
Well, people are getting so looking for new opportunities and new styles.
Oh, this brings me up the ratio of fermenters to bright tanks. So we consider a fermenter to be a 2-week turn. So if you're to take what the total volume is that tank can do, you just take whatever the volume is and you multiply it by 26. Now, how many bright tanks do you want? This depends upon your packaging plans. If you plan on kegging everything off at 3-to-1 ratio, where you have 3 fermenters to every bright tank, works just fine. You can push that to 4-to-1, but I don't suggest anything beyond that. But at the same time, we have some breweries that have a couple fermenters, and they may have 4 or 5 bright tanks because they use those as serving vessels, where nothing is kegged. It just goes straight to the tap line. So if you're on a little 5-barrel system and you're only supplying your own brewery, you may be able to do it very well with 3 fermenters and 6 bright tanks.
So I think John's in China, right, John? Do you do projects outside of the U.S.?
Yes, we do.
Because I would love to have some tanks being shipped to
Asia,
China.
that would be awesome.
It's like the
Yeah, no, that would be, I think we'd entertain that for sure.
Yeah, that's something that's not common. Any reliable suppliers in Asia?
It's tough.
Yeah, we don't
I
really-
tell people that it's not always the manufacturer, but the suppliers. If we were to literally pick up our shop, the entire thing, all employees, everything, and move to China, we've found that with a lot of stories that we've heard from American importers or manufacturers, that it may be their vendors that supplied them with low quality steel, where they produce the tank just fine and they find that it starts rusting after a year. So it's not always the manufacturer, it can be the other, it's just the business climate over there, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's the same in the food chain. It's got all the same problems. You don't, those suppliers up the tiers are really shaky.
That nobody can do it. DME tried, they sent over Canadians to China and the quality just tanked.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what you end up doing as a solution, John. Well, I guess we've come to the end of our time. Thanks. Oh, well, Martin has one last question.
Okay.
For a 10-barrel system, do you recommend 20 barrels fermenters?
It's good to get.
Yeah.
I'd say it's good to get one. I'd say it's good to get one because you're going to have a top-selling beer.
It's going to be your IPA,
Yeah.
30% of your sales.
There you go.
But it depends. I mean, how many barrels of beer are you looking to move? And it may not be best to, if you want 10 beers on tap, you may not need a 20-barrel fermenter because you're going to have such a variety.
Yeah.
So my question is always, how many beers do you want to have on tap and what volume? And that's what gets you to how many of what size. Some people I would never suggest to ever get a double-sized fermenter. They may not need it.
But if you have a flagship and you're cranking it out,
Just go
it's
for
great
it.
to have at least one of them.
Oh, yeah, I sold a system, they only got double-sized fermenters.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. Well, great, guys. It's a great session. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for bringing the beer. The beer came from Utah, but it wasn't from my old brewery. But that's okay. We like that. Thanks, and enjoy Maui, the vacationers we have
Yeah.
chiming in.
Perfect.
And we'll see you on the 18th of March. Don't forget, we sent invites out to our party we're having at the Craft Brewers Convention, which is going to be on Thursday night at Migration from 5 to 6:30. Hope to see as many of you there as possible. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, guys.